Okay, 3:05. Hey, good afternoon for us and maybe early evening for some of you. Thanks for joining. Still some people coming in, but let's get started. We're going to talk today about how to start your own micro bakery, something I'm very passionate about. I did a whole journey around starting my own small community bakery. And we also have Laila O'Boyle of The Early Rise, a micro bakery in San Francisco. Her Instagram is TheEarlyRiseSF, if you want to check it out. And I think probably a lot of you are following her already. And my name is Stan Van Orbeek. I live in Southern California, Santa Ana, just an hour south of LA. And I'm also the founder and CEO of a company called Simply Bread, and we are making both hardware and software to help people start a community bakery, including an oven and an online ordering platform. The first thing we want to talk about, what is a micro bakery? And we sort of define it when you're selling any baked goods from your home and you're doing it more than once, you are a micro baker. And maybe Laila, you can go from here. We'll go back and forth. We've got 15 minutes, I think, and then we'll do a pretty long Q&A session. So maybe go ahead, Laila. Do you maybe want to talk a little bit how you started and when you started and what you're doing and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, of course. So I've been baking my whole life. I'm sure some of you have followed my whole journey on Instagram. And about a year ago, I decided to make the plunge and go from double Dutch oven in a home oven, maybe 8 to 10 breads that took me 6 hours to do, and just baking for all the preschool moms and dads at very low level, which is totally great, micro baker. Decided to make the jump into permits, larger oven, more fridge space, really just going full into a slightly larger scale. And I've been doing that once a week for quite a while with breaks. As many of you probably know, I also have 3 young children. So it's kind of something that I do because I love it. And there is a certain type of person that just gets deep satisfaction from feeding your neighbors and your community, and kind of getting back to slow bread that isn't offered in plastic bags and made by the hundreds of thousands at a time. And it can really look like what you want it to look like. So as you can see here, when you're just beginning at the very, making very low amounts of bread, you really don't need to spend thousands of dollars and immediately think you need to buy 40 fancy bannetons and start getting a $2,000 bread fridge that's only for that fridge. You can start where you want to start at and kind of go from there. So the first thing I suggest that you would always do is start looking into your small business development center in your city. There's always something. There's some resource there for you to help you navigate getting your permit or your license. In San Francisco, it took me 7 months. So I think a lot of that had to do with COVID shortages. My health inspector told me many times he did not even have to come into my space for the permit that I have, and it still took that long. And he told me over and over again, we're trying to hire people. I'm so sorry. You're on our list. I have your application right here. I was the squeaky wheel constantly. I called every week. I was extremely kind, but it was really took a long time. So I would suggest that you do that first. And maybe you're getting some Venmo or cash on the side that they're not going to know about. But if you want to start selling on a little bit of a larger scale, you will need to have the permits and the licensing done. And that can be a pain in the butt. So reaching out to a small business development center or whatever it is, just looking online, San Francisco cottage food operation, Googling that in your city, in your town where you're at, to figure out what that process is like. Obviously, bannetons, you have to think about where you're going to refrigerate your bread if you're going the slow fermented sourdough way, which I'm sure a lot of you are. But if you're using a yeasted bread, you don't need that step. But that is a spot that I find a lot of my micro bakery community, the people I talk to a lot, that's the huge sticking point. Because if you have nowhere to cold proof your bread, what are you going to do? There's not really. There's nothing that can save you. You can leave bread in the fridge for a lot longer if you're only baking 2 at once in a home oven. But if you don't have the fridge to hold your bread's just going to overproof, as we know. Once you start getting into the more intermediate, you have more and more people asking you for bread. You're starting to get those calls. Maybe there's a little shop that's interested in doing some wholesale orders for you. That's when you can start thinking about leveling up, like getting, a lot of people are into milling their own flour right now. So then you're supporting your local grain economy, which is amazing. The guy that I get all of my berries from, he thanks us every time we order. Thank you so much. This movement in small micro bakeries milling their own flour has saved our farm. And I think that's really beautiful. And that's a whole part of kind of the movement that's happening right now, where more and more people are looking at their local grain economy. A proofing box, that's really starting to get fancy. That is where you are able to actually control the speed at which your bread is proofing all the time. I don't have a proofing box, but I'm trying to get one right now, so we'll see. And then as you keep going, there's the really cool, fun things like a mixer. Until 6 months ago, I was mixing directly in my bus tubs. I was just weighing on a bus tub, mixing it by hand, and then as you develop the gluten, it starts to separate from the bus tub, and it was only one dish to clean. So depending on the strength of your hands, how you're doing physically, a mixer is one of those things that you're going to want to consider once you're scaling up. But again, as you're scaling up with your mixer, then you're going to have to start thinking about scaling up with your cold proofing space and then also with your oven. And then once you have all of those things, that kind of opens the can of worms of, okay, what am I going to cool the bread on? Because I'm going to need a space where it's not steaming itself on a wooden countertop or wherever you have been working on. It's probably not going to be sufficient to cool the bread afterwards. And then as you can see, there's all these other things that kind of start to spiral once you are opening yourself up to more orders. How do you get your orders? How do you keep track of your orders? There's all these things you have to think about. And something I didn't really think about at the beginning was packaging. So if you're looking into your week of orders, if you don't have the bags you're going to put your bread in already, or you haven't printed out your labels that make your cottage food operation legal, then that's giving you hours and hours of worry and extra time that you have to spend when you're trying to package your bread or it's time for the customers to pick up. I personally went with the LLC route, a sole proprietorship LLC. That's just a personal decision. You do not have to have an LLC. You can just, actually, I'm sorry, I said sole proprietorship. A sole owner LLC is treated different in taxes than like a corporation. But you can also do a sole proprietorship as your business. That is a totally personal choice. But again, I urge you all that if you really are thinking about having a CFO, to reach out to your local small business development center. There's one almost everywhere. And those are the people that are going to tell you, no, don't waste your time doing this. Yes, you do really need to do this. And it will clarify a lot of these steps for you that can be really overwhelming, especially since a lot of bakers are creative types. And some of us don't really enjoy doing the paperwork. Yes, stand on it.
So what are the cottage license limits where you are? Because that's something a lot of people are asking.
Oh, yeah. So my limits in San Francisco are that I cannot go over $50,000 a year in sales, which for me right now is okay. And what's really nice is that San Francisco has 2 levels of CFOs. There's level A, which means I have to sell directly to my customers. So every week, my bread is offered at this German specialty store. And it's really nice for me because another thing I didn't think about in the beginning was I've just done 2 days of making and baking and prepping and doing all this work. And now my customers want a 7-hour pickup window because we've got the parents that want to pick up right after school pickup. And then we've got the people that work later in the evening that want to pick up at 8 p.m. And so then here's me running downstairs every 15 minutes to give people their bag. And that turned into a whole other set of hours that I am technically working. So for me to drop off bread at this specialty store and then she handle all the customers is huge. But then that also opens up the conversation about how much is she getting out of that? So there are all these things you have to think about. The CFO B gives you a much higher sales that you're allowed to have. It also allows you to sell to for wholesale accounts and have like the bread displayed in their case. So it's like I could drop off bread and they could then sell it to the people. With a CFO, I'm not allowed to do that. So people pre-order from me and then I give her the actual bags and they just say, hey, my name is Emily, I'm making up my bread. And she just hands them the bag of bread. A lot of states have two different like levels of permits or licenses that you can choose.
And the cost in general is not very high, right? I think here,
it's not
like $40 a year or something, or $70 a year. It's pretty.
Yeah, mine's like 53, 58, something like that. The CFOB is a little more expensive, but in the grant scheme of like pricing, I think it's $450 a year, which is also not a lot considering that you can go all the way up to I think 100 or 150,000 in sales in the CFOB.
And do they always do a health inspection for both of them?
No.
Not
so what I've talked to, I have a lot of micro bakery friends and it does vary a lot. Like I know in Georgia, they're extremely strict on CFOs. It's very hard to get a home bakery in Georgia. But in California, mine was like for me, it was painstaking because this is not how my brain works. So to like fill out all this paperwork was really terrible for me personally, but it really was not a lot of work. It was like, what does your space layout look like? You have to you have to show them labels of all the ingredients and how you're going to label your packaging. And it's basically filling out some paperwork and that's it. It really is not a lot of work. So it's pretty cool. And then nobody ever came and inspected my space.
Electrical is often, I see a little bit of a barrier. A lot of people, often the ovens, like our oven and other types of ovens, is often 220 or 240.
Yeah. For me, it ended up not being a very big cost because if you, I see Ashwani says North Carolina is pretty chill on restrictions, which is nice. It depends on where your bakery space is that you're opening up. It depends on what the existing electrical already is like. I've talked to a few people who actually had to have an extra breaker box installed for their oven because there wasn't an extra breaker for the oven. Yeah. And even that should be around $500. I ended up paying $80. That's it. Because my electrician, all he had to do, when I got the oven that I have downstairs, it didn't come with a plug. It just came with like wires that ended. And it cost me $80 to have them attach a plug. And I actually swap out my dryer plug outlet with my oven. Right. Because everyone's okay with everybody's okay with us not using the dryer for a few hours on my bake days on Wednesday morning, which I usually start baking at like 6 a.m. So nobody's trying to run the dryer at that point.
Laila, do we want to talk a little bit about acquiring customers and building a customer base? Because I think that's what also a lot of people are wondering. I mean, it's not a huge investment, but once you're a little bit serious about it and want to keep doing it, you also want to be sure you can retain your customers, etc. So what are the options, or what is your experience in not having these big swings and, like 1 week you have a lot of customers, another week you don't, so you want to have some consistency, right? If you want to.
Totally. So as you can see, I mean, a lot of the things that we listed here are kind of having a social media presence or even just a presence in your community, knowing that being aware that people need to know you are there. There is a lot of things happening that if you haven't told neighbors, outline little spots that allow you to still put up flyers. I know it sounds silly, but that still happens. Going to farmers market and just putting your name in there and trying to get in there. Maybe you only sell a little bit at the beginning. For me, I have to say that I personally really like using a platform for my ordering. Not everybody likes to do that because it means that I have to run pretty much every single purchase through a merchant processing, like everyone's paying through a credit card, which means that, it's nice to have cash and Venmo sales because we all know why. So, but for me, I use the platform Hotplate. And as soon as you have signed up for my website link, like sign up for pre-ordering, that person will get a text every single time I drop a menu. And I find that that's really great for customer retention because they're seeing it every time. And it's a very simple, hey, the Early Rise has made a drop. It'll open at, 7 p.m. Order with this link versus me constantly having to drum up the participation and be sending out emails every week. I do think that I've also had a really good turnout when I use my mailing list. So on my website at the homepage of my website, it says join the mailing list. And I send out an email every time that I drop a menu there too. And that really helps. I also think that there's a lot of people who have their Instagram solely to connect with their community. So if you have like a smaller Instagram, that doesn't matter if it's small, if everybody who follows you are people who are interested in your bread. I think that that's actually become a really good way to get customers.
And what about products? I mean, what I love about it is sort of changing products and trying new things. But it's also a bit of a burden, right? Because you need to deliver a little bit of consistent quality. So what do you do? Like for myself, I sort of do one product that I always do the same product every week, one or two maybe. And then I just alternate or just add these or seasonal, or something with herbs from my garden or, something interesting.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think you nailed it. I think everybody wants a country loaf or at least a standard plain, something that is unflavored. I think that when you're trying to determine your menu, it's actually down to what are you really comfortable with, because there is nothing as bad as you get 7, jalapeno cheddar loaves ordered, but you haven't practiced it that much. And then the loaves aren't great. That's way worse than only offering one type of bread that you nail. That's something that I learned really quickly. I a year ago threw myself in there, went to bed, woke up in the morning to $700 worth of sales, and I offered 8 different products. And it was insanity. I really wish that I had just done country loaf, sandwich loaf, maybe one flavored loaf or a focaccia or something. I think it's mostly that you need to put a lot of thought into your capacity and what you can really do well. And then I agree with you, Stan, to have like a couple things you always have, and then a couple things that are like more fun. And as you go, you're going to see that there are some things that everybody always orders. Like if I put baguettes on the menu, they're going to sell out. They just will.
Something about getting help. I don't know. I think in our county, you can have one full-time equivalent under the cottage law. I don't know if San Francisco is different. So here you can pretty much have a student or someone. I think it's just one full-time equivalent a year, which is quite a lot of work, right? I mean, because I think the full-time equivalent, which is like 40 hours a week, so you'll actually never get there. Is there any rule?
Well, I mean, maybe. Yeah. There are some cottage bakers that bake like every day. They do a lot.
So you should
in San Francisco, they only care about sales. They don't care if you have employees. They just care about sales. You only have to switch to a CFO B or then get like a completely different license if you have more than 8 full-time employees, which like that's never going to happen for me. At least I don't want to, because I'd be paying a lot of people. I don't know about that.
Great. And you need a B license, right, to resell, right, to someone else.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a B license, and that's pretty typical of a lot of places. But it does vary quite a bit. And I would say that if you aren't sure, there's also a lot of Facebook groups that are great resources on micro bakeries where people in different cities and in different states will kind of tell you like exactly what that process is like. And that can help out a lot.
So maybe a little bit about talk about advantages and disadvantages. Maybe.
I mean, I think that the benefits right here, you can see it.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's really nice that I can get up, brush my teeth, get my cup of coffee, wash my hands, and start. Make sure my hair is up and just go for it. It's downstairs. But that also means that maybe at 10 p.m. at night, I'm like, might as well go downstairs and mill some flour real quick. And then 2 hours later, I'm like, what am I doing? I am working. So you have to really watch yourself, because the big pro of it being in your home can also be something that means that you're kind of working all of the time. But again, we're entrepreneurs here and we have our own businesses, which is honestly a privilege, and it's pretty amazing to do that. I also suggest that when you sit down and you're starting to plan when you want to offer bread to people, or when you want to offer drop offs at the wholesaler that's going to sell it, or that's going to, give it to your customers, you really have to work backwards. Like, bread needs to be done by 11. What time does that mean that I have to start baking my loaves? What time does my oven have to be ready then? Okay, then when do the breads need to be in the fridge the day before so they proof long enough? It's like a whole process. And before you already set a precedent for your customers, like, hey, Wednesdays is the pickup day, you have to think it to yourself if that actually works for you.
Right.
You have to think to yourself, is this really the day that I'm going to want to be doing this for the next year, for the next few years? Because it can start as this fun little thought, but it really is probably going to be more time than you think. For me, I love to walk around my neighborhood. It's a very walkable neighborhood in San Francisco. And I think to myself, there are people who are eating my bread in their homes right now. And that is just so special versus, cool, I just picked up a 2-pack of Dave's Killer Bread at Costco, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying that this is like a whole kind of movement that's happening right now. And it's really special. We all know that we're learning still about our gut microbiome and everything that's going on in our stomachs and like all these things. And there's really this movement happening with these slow fermented, really special breads that, aren't being produced in a mass facility. You really can't make sourdough in like a huge mass. You can make it to a certain extent, but at some point it's just not even possible.
No, exactly. Same for me. I met so many neighbors and co-workers. So let's start going through the Q&A. North Carolina is quite chill on restrictions. That's good to hear. Same for Colorado. Take a class, follow the rules. Maybe do you need, Laila? Do you need a food handler's permit? That's something?
So
right?
In San Francisco, it was like they gave you could just print out a CFO checklist. And one of the things was to do a serve safe test. It is like
10 minutes.
An hour-long webinar where you answer questions as you go. You take a 5-minute long test afterwards, and then you print out your certification and you hand it in with your CFO. Compared to what I did when I opened a restaurant 10 years ago, it's nothing. It's like was so quick and easy. Does your home insurance company have any issues or added costs to cover your micro bakery? So I'm a renter. And I am not, California is kind of special in that, I don't know when it was founded, but it's been around for a while now, where there's basically like a California community insurance pool. Like, you pay $300 and you are insured for your micro bakery. It is kind of like it's like a coalition. It's like a lot of people came together to provide this insurance. And if you are a CFO in California, you can basically pay into it. And then that money is there available that insures bakers in case something happens, like somebody breaks a tooth on a cherry pit or something like that. I do also think, though, a lot of this point of a CFO is that you're not allowed to cook with any hazardous food. So obviously I can cook with a cherry and I can cook with a nut, which is that example. But most of the time when people have hazardous food issues or, need to go to the hospital because they ate something you made, it's because it had meat or cheese or something in it that's a hazardous food. And I am not allowed to bake with any of those things.
Yeah, so bread is a fairly low risk.
Yeah, that's also a reason why I decided to have a sole owner LLC. Is I just decided I would rather not risk that if something crazy were to happen, that they can go after all my personal assets. I would rather that's just not how it works. But I'm also married to a lawyer, so that's why. Honestly, I probably would have just gotten a sole proprietorship. Do you have to list your address? No, So I already answered, I'm renting. I cleared it with my landlord. He has seen our whole space. It really helps if you just give them a lot of bread. Then usually they're not going to say no. But you do not have to put, at least in San Francisco, I have to put my zip code, but it does not have my home address on the labels. I would probably feel uncomfortable with that.
And I don't think there is a lot of, unless it's in your rental contract, but there's not a lot of regulation.
No.
If you're a renter or an owner. So Natalie, is asking, anyone here from Canada and know some of the rules for starting a micro bakery? I mean, we do have a lot of customers in Canada. There's a lot of people starting a micro bakery. And so Canada seems to be fairly relaxed, especially in smaller places. So yeah, sure. I mean, you just need to find a county. I don't know if you have, there's a lot of people living, like in the US, even a lot of people live in unincorporated places. So you need to sort of more go to the county than the city. Yeah, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. We have a lot of people in Canada, actually. So Mike is asking, how many loaves of what size are you producing per week, Laila?
It really depends on the week. I am generally on my Wednesday bake day doing somewhere between 30 to 40 loaves right now, but they're all different size. And I'm still not, I mean, you see me posted on my Instagram stories, and it does send it out to my pre-existing customers through Hoplate, which is my order processing website. But I'm still not like pushing. I've never done any advertising, spending money. I've never done, because again, I told you all, like, I am like maxed out. I'm doing this because I love it and it brings me joy, and I can't only be a parent. A lot of people can, and it's amazing, and I just can't. It doesn't fulfill me in that way. Also, I have 2-year-old twins, so like I need a day where I get to do what I love. The size of loaves, it just varies. My country loaf is about at 850, depending on what hydration I put it at that day. If it's a really thirsty flour, it can be more. If it's not, it's less. Mm-hmm. And that for me was determined by my mixer size. So when I got a mixer, I had to figure out how much dough can I fit in here and how many loaves can that be? And is that one whole full load of my oven? That's the kind of things you start to think about when you scale up, because why would I mix 15 loaves of bread and then I can only fit 8 in, whatever amount in my oven? Right. I really like to keep those all equal. So it's hard to answer that question, Mike, because I do bread rolls, I do sandwich loaves, I do all different types of bread, and they're all at different weights.
Yeah. It's a lot of responsibility, and I think it ties into something you love doing, and then becomes a little bit of a job or chore, right? And
yeah,
I think it's like a lot of people care a lot about what they do and the reason and why and how. So it's something you need to be careful with. We have seen a few people that just took a break at one point because it was getting, you sort of need to self-limit, right, in a way, because it can outgrow. It's just going to grow.
I would say also don't start one day, because
right. Don't do
one day is not one day of work. There's a make day and there's a bake day. And then honestly, for me, there's a prep day where I mill my flour and I just get my, what together, like make sure my space is all ready to go, make sure everything is really good. I really like to get my labeling and my packaging going, because I find that if I write on my bags the person's name and what they ordered, and then I also prepare my bread bags with the labels, if all of that matches, then I know I haven't made a mistake. You're like, you're checking you're cross-checking that you're doing everything correctly. But burnout, I mean, it is a physical job. Like, you all know this. You are schlepping 50-pound bags. You are dumping, you're folding huge amounts of dough, and you have to really be ready for that. You have to force yourself to take breaks during the day. You just do. It's really, really important. And to eat. It's so easy to forget.
Lisa is asking, have you offered your customer discounts or free loaves? I mean, I did plenty, not in a very organized way, but there's just leftovers, there's new things I try. You just like,
Yes. So I have 2 things. When I first started baking, I offered a pay-as-you-can Google Doc, where I was just like, I'm going to try doing this once a week with 10 loaves, and I'm just going to offer it to anybody who wants it, and hopefully they'll give me $1 or $2 so that I'm not just losing money on flour. It was really great. I learned a lot. Doing that, and I technically wasn't even permitted yet or anything. It was all friends. And in San Francisco, if you're offering it on donation based, you technically can do that. It's not illegal because you're not selling it. And then I have a WhatsApp group that is of random people, mostly parents in my neighborhood. And I will send out a text that's like, yo, I have, this many loaves of bread that are a little flat, or they got a little burned, or I cut them in half because it's a new recipe and I wanted to know consistency of if I'm shaping right, whatever the things are. And that's kind of fun because then I also put a little jar out for those people and they tend to give me a few bucks.
I mean, there's even a baker, you can look it up, it's Aaron. His bakery is called Dough Nation Bakery.
That's cool.
And yeah, he doesn't charge. It's all donation based. And it also works because people I know, I also started doing, in the beginning, I didn't have a fixed price. I would just put a jar outside and people actually pay more if there's no price on it.
Yeah, people are really generous in a lot of.
It depends on the neighborhood or something, right? Or so.
Yeah.
So Ashwani, do you offer sliced loaves and what kind of slicer? I don't. I think, and a slicer is a little bit of a challenge. It's expensive. It's hard to get. There's not a lot of, or you need to find something used and has maintenance. So, yeah, the blades are set distance. Little bit. So I rather give people or buy people or tell them what bread. You know what it is? You need to teach people how to cut bread and and give them tell them a good bread knife. I mean, that helps because
which is not expensive. The Mercer knife is great and it's like $20. Really. Yeah. I agree with Stan. I worked at a bakery for years when I was 16 and they had all the money and our slicer was a piece. They're known for being a pain in the butt. Yeah. They're annoying. Once you've used them a certain amount of times, just like what Stan said, they're not sharp anymore. So then it's really scary. You have to be really careful with those. I do not have a slicer. And I think I'm really in the minority because I've never had a customer ask me to slice their bread.
I think it's more about education. I think if people are asking for sliced bread, you really need to educate them on, yeah. So in a way.
Yeah.
So there was a question, remind me of what CFO means. It's
just a cottage food operation.
Yeah. What's the name of the California Insurance Coalition again? Do you know what the name of it is, Laila?
I can look it up.
Yeah. Can you put toppings on your focaccia? Yes, I do all the time. I've got a big backyard, big garden, and I do shallots and I do all sort of stuff. Put all sort of stuff on my focaccia. Made some yesterday, actually.
Yeah, for me, they asked me to submit a label per type of focaccia. So I was like, okay, here's one that the only difference is it says olives and tomatoes, and here's one that the only difference is it says potatoes and onions.
Yeah.
For an example, I could not put ham on my focaccia, and I could not put cheese on focaccia.
Yeah. So do you know of any micro bakeries in the Bay Area that would be open to having people help out for some days to see what the process is like an internship or something? I'm in Sonoma. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are open for help. And we have a good list of micro bakers. We've also been trying to set up some training, for example, you have Central Milling has a location in Petaluma, which we've been trying to work with. We've got a place here in Southern California, but I think, we've got a good list of people as always. I mean, people are so helpful. On our side, we're making a little bit more educational content and doing these seminars and maybe some sort of open office, some open office hours or something. So we can, and I always like to come to Sonoma. I was there 2 weeks ago.
Why?
So I'll come. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, I would say the industry right now is in an interesting space where it's getting more and more kind of status oriented, where it's if you want to go in and stage somewhere, you kind of need to let people know what your experience is. If you're trying to get in somewhere Tartine or a place that has a really big name, there are people that are waiting at the door to get in there and learn from them. But if you're not, you don't care about that name and you're not trying to kind of do that, just go on Instagram and message little bakeries in Sonoma and say, hey, I will do your dishes. I will do whatever it is you don't want to do, just so I can start to feel what this is like.
Yeah.
Just be a kind person and say, this is my experience, this is who I am, and I would just love to learn. And I always throw in there, I'll do all the grunt work. And I don't mind doing the grunt work. Do their dishes, help it out, make the day go faster for them, and they would love to have you learn from them in exchange,
Yeah, Nikki's asking, do you have a cutoff number of orders? Yes, and typically I do.
Definitely.
Otherwise, otherwise it becomes just unmanageable. You don't have enough cold space, or having a normal kitchen oven can be limiting for sure. That's the reason why I designed. So the backstory is, I started my own micro bakery with Dutch ovens. I went to a rental space with cast iron pans, right, with Dutch ovens, like 6 in a convection oven. They just killed me. It was like really hard. I tried to buy an oven, couldn't get one. It was such long lead time and shipping from Europe. So that's why I designed the oven, actually. And yeah, that's a game changer, right? If you can do like 12 or 15 loaves in an hour. I found in a kitchen oven, a lot of people are doing it. But what's it just doesn't move the needle. If you can fit 4 combo, like large cookers in it, if you can fit 4 in your oven, you're lucky. You could do 4 an hour. And if you do 3 sessions, like 3-4 hours. But I've seen people doing a massive amount. It's just crazy. It's like, so yeah, I would say 10, like 10, 20 or something. For me, personally, there's a limit for me, because it just doesn't, it just gets too hard on your
Yeah, it all depends on the equipment that you have. Yeah. Right now, I cut off at 1 load in my 3-deck oven per type of bread. Yeah. So I can do 9 country loaves at once in there. I only offer 9 a week. I can do, 48 Brötchen, which is 16 orders, and that is what I cut it off at. But again, you got to do your own timeline and figure that out.
A lot of questions about pricing. How do you determine pricing?
Sure.
Pricing.
So for me, okay, the standard in the industry for any food cost is about 25%. I think that is crazy for the amount of time and care that goes into sourdough bread. It is different than a lot of things in that you have to let it sit overnight in a fridge. So, yes, it's a lot of hands-off time, but if you think about it, it does take a lot of thought process and time, and actual time, like not you working, but the amount of time it takes you to start the dough and then it's done and it's a loaf of bread. I like to keep my food costs at 15%. And then of course you have to factor in all the packaging, labels, printing ink, the bag the bread's going to go in, the bag that the 2 loaves of bread are going to go in. Yeah. All of these things cost money. The stamp with my logo on it, you have to figure that all out. But I would say that you want to probably keep your food costs on the high end at 20% for bread. Mm-hmm. If you decide you want to do a bread that has really expensive inclusions, maybe it's a little bit higher. That's okay. I could see that going there. But even my really pricey, like I mill 100% of the flour from a fresh local grower, and it has tons of fancy seeds in it, my rye bread. Even that I think is at 18. So I try really hard to keep it.
And it depends. So Tom is sharing some data we have from bakers. Average is $9.5 for plain sourdough life. Loaf is $9.5. That's what we see across bakers, and it depends. There's here in LA, in Silver Lake, in the east of LA, a small bakery. I went a buckwheat loaf $22, right? So come all bacon East LA, you'll make it's quite amazing. Right, so I think we're between 8 and 14. It depends. It's really, and there's some products like Focaccia is always a bit of a money maker, because you can you do 1 pan, you cut it in 4, you sell it for $12. That's actually where you make good money, and that's
totally. I agree.
Consistent. What mill do you use? I have a small. I'll put up. I've got a small block mill. I don't know what you have, Laila. This is a mock mill, right?
I have a mock mill too, but I have the 700.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay.
The Pro 200. Mine, you can just mill forever. It doesn't need to be shut off at all.
Yeah. So this is a little, I mean, I don't do like 100%, so I just add 10% or something. And this is fine because even with 10%, it doesn't heat up too much. So there's basically two on the market, right? It's like and then what is it, Komodo or something? Or
yes, I can't actually remember what the other one is called, but there's two and they're pretty similar. And then if you don't have those, then you're looking at the giant ones that are thousands and thousands.
Lisa, would you start out with a bread oven or wait until you're more established? I mean, I would say you need to start with a bread oven, but I sell bread ovens, so it's sort of not really. I mean, I think you need to sort of be sure you'll have the volume for it. So, and it's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? Because if you want an oven that's performing, that does well, it's an investment, right? And you'll make it back, right? But you sort of need to be serious and in for it. But it is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem where making the money to buy the oven, not having an oven, is a little bit sort of like, counterintuitive. Like on our side, we've been like offering all sort of like financing, etc., to sort of make that happen, right? Because it's often people are in the situation where like, if I had the oven, I could pay for it, right? But I need to money, so it depends a little bit if you have the cash. I mean, if you can do it, it's a game changer, right? It's just,
totally. Yes.
Between 12 or 15 loaves an hour, you can do 40, 50 loaves in the morning. Like by 9 or 10, I did 40 or 50 loaves. I mean, we have, with our oven, we have people like Katie, she's doing 300 loaves, 400 loaves a week with one oven, right? She did 500. In high season, 500 a week at an average price of $12. That does pay for an oven very fast. So, but she's in a small beach town, so it's a little bit easier for her. Label, label. There's like these little label printers on Amazon. And labels have dates. I print just the labels for the day, right?
My labels don't have dates, and I do use stickers. I actually just buy Avery labels on Amazon and print it from my home printer. It might not be the best way, but it at least doesn't have a huge lead time. I would like to work up to having stamps for each recipe and stamping, because almost all ink that's produced is compostable. And I really have trouble with plastic. And I really hate that I'm using all paper bags that can be put in the compost, but now I'm putting stickers on them.
Same thing.
It all depends on what you want.
Same thing for packaging. We're actually going to sell bread bags soon, because I'm also fed up with the ones that rip from Amazon.
That's great. I did look up my insurance real quick. It's through Flip. It's called the Food Liability Insurance Program, but I'm pretty sure that it's based out of California. So,
share this recording. Yes, we'll share this recording. Yes, we will. Have you tried baking convection oven? If so, what problem did you face with those? Is just
you have to bake in a Dutch oven.
Yeah, you need to bake in a Dutch oven. You will just have a crust before you know, and you won't get an oven spring.
I mean, you can try. You can do the lava rocks and all that stuff.
I have to be honest. I have seen people on baking steels or on baking stones being fairly successful. It's just very hard to control, because you open the oven and the convection just blows out. I mean, there's people who have been cutting their fans, switching off the convection, but the idea of a convection oven is, a kitchen oven is so cheap to build because there is convection, and it's easy to heat up and doesn't have a lot of thermal mass. So it's just a counter. It's just a little bit counter intuitive. So convection oven, what problem do you face with? So it's you really need a baking stone, and you need preferably steam injection, or you need to find a way to generate steam. Shannon, what kind of oven do you recommend for micro bakery? Well, there's this oven, which I recommend and I built. So. But there's a bunch of other ones. There's the Simply Bread oven that is here made in California, but there's a few other ones. Also, I was baking double home ovens for 2 years. I was baking 6 to 7 hours straight. Oh, simply love my Simply oven. Okay, can you share where you buy your bags from? I don't know. I've been buying on Amazon. I'm really don't like those bags.
No, I buy mine from Webstaurant. It's they charge a lot for shipping, but if I just plan correctly so that I only order from them when I'm getting a lot of things, it's worth it to pay for the shipping because I think my bags are 13 cents a piece now. I bought 1,000. So again, it's kind of like the oven thing where I decided I applied for a grant program. I did a crowdfunding campaign, which Ashwani actually did a coaching session with me with that. And I did all sorts of things so that I could buy all the things up front. That doesn't mean everybody has to do it. But I mean, I've been working through this 1,000 bags for 6 months and I have, like it all depends on how you can do it.
Yeah. Tom, what is the size loaf of that $9.5? Is it an 800-gram loaf? Do we know?
850,
yeah, 850 grams. I read some ovens have a turnaround time. Yeah, so the what we call the sort of reheating, or how do we call it? Yeah, so I've been loading sometimes just one after the other. It also depends the hydration, if you've got very high hydration. But to be honest, by the time, for our oven, I know, because I've done a lot of long days, I know that by the time I get to the fridge and get my loaves out and score them, and you're a few minutes in, and it's totally fine, actually. So I don't have a long time between sessions, actually.
I would say that that's special for Simply Bread. I'm baking out of a Nero right now, which is the same as a Rofco. It's just a different name, but it is essentially exactly the same. And I need at least 20 minutes, if not 30.
Yeah, that's
or else my loaves do not bloom the way that they should.
It's also got to do with insulation, right? Like how much heat you lose and how strong your heating elements are.
Right.
I've been pretty successful in sort of, and I mean, we'll open the mic in a few minutes, and maybe some other users can say. Como is the other mill, right? You also make pull-apart rolls. What are pull-apart rolls?
Yes, of course. You can make any bread in these ovens. Pull-apart loaves are just placed closer to each other, where when they expand and bake, you pull them apart as you eat them.
Okay. There's another mill called Nutri-Mill that I didn't hear of. That's cool. Good evening from the Gambia. That's pretty cool. Wow.
Hi, welcome.
Nice. Simply ovens. Yeah, we're ramping up volume, so we're getting units out actually in not too much time. So you should just ask us for lead time. Got the same thing.
Okay.
Do you plan to use any accounting software system for bookkeeping?
Yes.
QuickBooks or something.
Yeah, I think honestly, I did a bunch of free webinars through the Small Business Development Center. And we did a whole one just on financing, which again, you guys, I really can't press how much they helped me. Like, I mean, my Small Business Development Center, I don't know what you want to call her, but like my coach or whatever, she got me a $5,000 grant, through the California Dream Fund. And I'm not saying she got it. I did a lot of work at it. What?
Should all move to California.
California's amazing. It's so much money. But I will say that I'm about to do QuickBooks, and it is kind of pricey for me, honestly, to spend that much money. I think it's like, I can't even remember how much it is now, but it's at least $20 or $30 a month. And I'm really doing small batches, but right now I'm doing all my taxes for this last year. And I really wish that I just had all my QuickBooks stuff together because they track everything. You link your debit card, you link your credit card, everything is tracked for you, all your expenses, everything that you need is just right there. And you don't really have to think about it. It even categorizes things for you because obviously equipment is going to be written off differently than, ingredients or permits and fees or, miles driven or all that kind of stuff. So it can calculate a lot of that stuff for you, and your time is money. Yeah. You have to remember that. Yeah. You are worth the time.